Okay, so let's delve into economic policy a bit. So the OECD recently predicted, this is lovely, that Canada's economy will be the worst performing advanced economy over 2020 to 2030, and then 3 decades after. Now, we haven't been doing very well as a country, not only under the Liberals. We weren't doing that great before under the Conservatives as well, especially compared to the US and many other countries that in some sense are our peers. And so that's a pretty damn gloomy forecast, right? 40 years out, we're going to be the worst performing advanced economy in the world. And so what do you think the Conservatives conceivably did wrong in the past to fail to stave that off? And what do you think you can do differently? And maybe we can so you're interested in housing, you're interested in deregulation, especially on the housing front. I want to focus in as we progress through this part on energy in particular, because that's a killer topic for everyone in the world at the moment, I would say. So what did the Conservatives do wrong? What has Canada done wrong? What have the Liberals done wrong, apart from, printing money like madmen and instituting these arbitrary rules? And what do you think you can do differently?
Right. Well, I would respectfully disagree on the Conservative economic track record. If you look at the the 08, 09 financial crisis, we came through better than any of the other G7 countries, certainly way better than the Americans. We didn't have a housing crash here. We didn't have a banking crisis. We didn't have to bail out a single bank. We had very modest inflation. I don't think it ever cracked 4%. And I don't think it was above 3% for more than 1 or 2 quarters in the entire 10-year period Harper was around, and unemployment stayed relatively low. You could buy the average house when Harper left office in Canada was $434,000. It's kind of hard to imagine that now. But on a fast forward to energy, we need to repeal C-69. That's the bill that makes it effectively impossible to build an energy project in Canada today, because it has introduced a whole series of sociological questions that into the process that make sense to nobody. Trudeau has said that energy projects cause gender imbalances, and therefore, and when someone applies to build one, they have to write a sociological report on what the pipeline or the mine will do for gender relations. Well, what that in addition to being sort of ridiculous pop culture sociology, it introduces massive uncertainty for investors because they don't really know how and why a project will be approved or rejected. And they don't have 7 years to sit around. So they'll take their money and invest it in other parts of the world. And that's why the projects aren't happening here. We don't mine lithium in Canada, even though we have lots of lithium in this electric car battery era. We're importing lithium from China because they actually get projects built. However, they burn coal to refine their lithium. So ironically, we're just inducing pollution in other countries when we buy electric cars that are made whose lithium is refined in that country. So if we could approve a lithium mine in Canada, we could actually mine the stuff, refine it, manufacture it here. We have the 3rd biggest supply of oil on planet Earth, but we're importing 130,000 barrels of overseas oil every day. The solution to which is so obvious, it is that right next door to the St. John port, where we bring in the oil, we have St. John's, Newfoundland, is capable of adding another 400,000 barrels of Canadian production. We could just approve that production, then we could ban foreign oil, overseas oil from Canada altogether. And that would mean that the dollars wouldn't be leaving our country for overseas dictatorships, but would be staying here paying Canadian wages instead. And natural gas, we got 1,300 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. And you know what you do? You get natural gas onto a ship, you have to freeze it down to a liquid. Well, what do we have in Canada? Cold weather, as you know. And so it takes a hell of a lot less energy to liquefy natural gas in Canada.
Jesus, finally an advantage for cold weather.
Finally an advantage. And we have also geographic advantage. So we're the closest point in North America to Asia is BC. The closest point in North America to Europe is Newfoundland. So we have a shorter shipping distance, less energy needed to liquefy gas, and yet we haven't succeeded in building a single major liquefaction facility in Canada, despite the fact that in 2015 there were about 18 proposed projects. So you could approve those projects, we could be bringing hundreds of billions of dollars of opportunity to our people, particularly our First Nations people. But it takes getting those regulatory gatekeepers out of the way to let it happen.
What makes you think you could take on the woke crowd in relationship to such things? So we could say, well, what about the planet? What about the climate crisis? You're going to turn back to fossil fuels. You're going to demolish the globe in the next 30 years. We should be moving towards net zero. You're going to doom the poor to catastrophe while you're pretending to elevate them economically. It's like, and you're going to be like cut into ribbons by that crowd. And so let's talk about climate change and the Paris Accords and all that. You want to promote Canadian energy. There's a foreign policy reason for doing that. You made a case for liquefaction. Like, exactly what should Canada's position be in relationship to climate change and then the development of our energy infrastructure?
Well, our resources are not the problem. They're the solution. For example, we export our natural gas. We can displace foreign coal burning electricity. The energy hungry Asian markets are desperate for non-coal sources of electricity, but they need things like natural gas to replace it, coal with. And we have that gas. We also have the biggest supply of civilian grade uranium in the world, right in Saskatchewan, that could be used to export to regenerate emissions free, pollution free nuclear energy. We have an overabundance of hydroelectricity in Manitoba and Quebec that we could be exporting to the northern United States to displace their coal-fired electricity. We could be using small modular nuclear reactors to decarbonize the electrical grid for the oil sands, and we have the ability to do that right here in Canada. We have the carbon and capture and storage techniques in our home province of Alberta are second to none. There are some, Whitecap Resources, a mid-sized company there, says that it's actually now a carbon negative company. In other words, they bury more carbon in the ground than they put into the air. And so we have the technology and the resources to do it. But what we're doing is punishing our own resource sector to the advantage of heavily polluting foreign dictatorships with no environmental standards, and who use the money to do great mal. And so we would be better off to displace their energy with ours and use that as a method of fighting for the environment while enhancing the well-being of our working class at the same time.